Hi, I'm Tyler, and welcome to another episode of my Christian Music Week reviews. Each week I take 5 releases, albums, EPs, or singles, and after having listened to them all week, I come back here and I review them. I share what I think about them. So without further ado, let's get to this week's first release, Lecrae's deluxe version of Restoration, the Deluxe album. Before I get into my review on Lecrae's Restoration, the Deluxe album, want to thank Reese for submitting this request. Thank you for requesting Lecrae. And I'll get to your other requests of Zauntee and Parris Chariz a little later in this video. But we'll talk about Lecrae right now. So, this Deluxe album, let's talk about what's new here. So there is 4 new songs. There's a remix of Deep End, which sounds pretty much the same as the original version of Deep End. The only difference is that the first verse is rapped with new lyrics by Rhapsody instead of Lecrae rapping on the first verse. And then we get Lecrae to jump in with his part from the original version after that. In the second verse, I mean, to be clear. And then we have Celebrate More on this album, which was previously only a 116 song. Now it's a Lecrae song on here featuring Andy Mineo and Holby, who are also on the original release of this track. Sounds the same as the original, of course, but now it's just released under the Lecrae name, and not just the 116 name. And let's dive into the sound of this. So, I feel like a few songs kind of have a little bit of a gospel influence in it, just kind of like the first album did. By the way, this album has definitely grown on me in the past few months. It seems like going back and listening to it now, seems like I enjoy it more. So just thought I mentioned that for those who heard my first review of this album. So we got a few tracks that sprinkle in some gospel elements. Rich and Famous definitely got more of a pop feel to it, I would say. And then there's a couple songs on here that are just straight up hip hop. And as for the lyrics here, well, let's review the themes on the original album here a little bit, of course. Talks about God setting us free from our past and God walking with us through our problems and using the pain to make us stronger. And also talks about God loving us and not leaving us no matter what we're going through, no matter what we've done. And then on the deluxe version, though, there's a couple other themes that show up here. So, Rich and Famous talks about the trappings that come with being famous. And then Celebrate More talks about worrying less, celebrating more, looking for the positives in the midst of hard situations. And then a couple songs calls out Christians for ignoring race issues. And also Lecrae looking to God to help him through the hate that he gets for standing up for that. Standing up for regarding race issues. Up next, Zach Williams' cover of Elevation Worship song Rattle, which featured the guest appearance from Stephen Furtick. Zach Williams' new single, which is a cover of Elevation Worship's Rattle, featuring guest appearance from Pastor Stephen Furtick. Let's talk about this song. So, overall, kind of starts out sounding like a typical Martin Worship track, but then he gets into the more gritty southern rock as the song later on in the song. And And then Stephen Furtick, after the main part of the song, does a scripture reading from Ezekiel 37 as part of the song. And as for the lyrics here, talks about God rattling the dry bones back to life. No impossible can stop his miracles. Up next, Peabod's new EP, Growing Up Part 1. Peabod's new EP, Wonderful and Scary, Part 1. Let's talk about it. Before I do, I want to say this came as a request from Jake. Thanks, Jake, for requesting it. And now let's talk about it. So overall, has definitely a pop and hip-hop feel to it. Kind of a combo, I would say, of the two. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Group 1 Crew's stuff back in the day. I like Group 1 Crew better than I like Peabod, I would say. But some good stuff here from Peabod. And as for the lyrics here, talks about looking to God in the midst of the scary. And also, it speaks of God's unconditional love for us, whatever we go through. Up next, Zauntee's new album's 334. Alright, Reese, it's back to your request now. Let's talk about Zauntee's 334 album. And thanks, Reese, again, for requesting this in the Parris Chariz Airwavs edition we're going to get to next. But let's talk about Zauntee. So, pretty good album here. I would say, though, it's not as hard-hitting hip-hop as 24/7 was earlier this year. I mean, don't get me wrong, there were still some hard-hitting tracks on here, but there's also some lighter tracks that are more R&B sounding, I would say. And he even throws rock elements into a couple songs, which is kind of gives a couple songs a different feel here. And as for the lyrics here, love the lyrics to this album. Talks about how God is greater than the dark worries in his head. It also talks about him fighting to achieve his dreams. And talks about trusting God even when it's hard to. Trusting his timing. And also it talks about him fighting to make it. And when he does make it, he'll be able to look back and see how it was God that got him there. Up next, our last release for today. Also a request from you, Reese. Parris Chariz's Airwave edition of 2045. So, Parris Chariz's 2045 Deluxe version, Airwavs Deluxe version, he basically gave us a whole nother album. So the original album had like 15 tracks and 2 interludes on it. And he gave us 10 more songs. So he basically gave us a whole nother album. But let's talk about it. So stylistically, I would say it follows a pretty similar pattern of rapping, and singing. And bass and synth and guitar, I would say, as the original tracks did. Lyrics, though, is when we start to see a little bit of a difference here in particular, though. Oh, another notable thing about the sound on the deluxe version versus the original version is there's more samples used on here. So I took note of that. And let's dive into the lyrics here. So the original version, we saw themes like, well, a lot of the album was him talking about his relationship with this girl who didn't really love him back, but he was trying to love her with Jesus' help. Also, talked about wanting to live for God. That's another theme. And also being where he is today because of God. And the deluxe version does continue some of those themes, but also adds a couple more themes into the mix. One is talking about how he wants to make an impact on the airwaves for God. Kind of seems to consider his impact a little bit more on here. And also talks about wanting to help people no matter who they are. Well, that's it for this week. Come back next week for 5 more releases. If you like what you saw in this video, please subscribe. Also, if you have any thoughts on today's release, let me know in the comments below. Alrighty, so this is the last regular show for a while. I'm going to review Matthew West's Thanksgiving single, Gobble Gobble, this Monday. And then it's on to Christmas music next week. So here's a little update on requests. Obviously, Christmas releases from this year are encouraged into requests right now, since that's what I'm going to be working on. But also, if there's any releases that are after the releases in today's video that you want to request for an after Christmas episode, that'll include the best 5 releases that I didn't get to because I was doing Christmas music. You can request those, and then I'll get to those releases after Christmas. Sounds good? Well, I'll go now. See you on Monday. Bye.